Hi there, my name's Alexandra Trahan and I'm a master's student in Stephen Cook's lab in the Fish Ecology, Conservation and Physiology Laboratory. And today I'm going to be asking the question, do carbonated beverages reduce bleeding from gill injuries in angled northern pike? I would like to thank NSERC, Muskies Canada, the Ottawa River Muskie Factory, the Anderson Family Foundation, and all my co-authors listed here on the screen. During catch and release events, hooking injuries occur. This can be due to the hook being in a sensitive location, air exposure, or improper handling of the fish during hook removal. So we know deep hooking is not uncommon during angling events, but when this happens, what can we do? There are two solutions. We can try and prevent deep hooking injuries from happening, or we can try and stop the bleeding once it occurs. Now, although bleeding can be a common occurrence during angling, there hasn't been any science or studies that have researched how to stop it. But more recently, an angling tactic has gone viral on social media. There are people pouring carbonated beverages like Mountain Dew and Coca Cola over the gills of bleeding fish. This has also been shared by angling guides by word of mouth and online, and in Facebook groups where many people are in support of this, claim to use it while angling, and encourage others to use it on various fish species, including muskie. However, there's been no science done to back up this tactic, therefore there's no legitimate confirmation if it is beneficial to the fish or what possible side effects there are. You may be thinking, why would anyone even think this would work? Well, it is known that CO2 has many effects on fish homeostasis. A high environmental concentration of CO2 has been shown to induce bradycardia, heighten ventilatory rates, and hypertension in fish. So the idea is, pouring carbonated beverages with high CO2 content, it is thought that these effects would conceivably increase perfusion of the gills and help them if the gills were injured. Many people believe that this practice would do more good than harm. However, it is more likely to cause harm rather than achieve the purported benefits of these substances. These beverages are made up of more than just CO2. They have caffeine, they have sugar, both of which are known to not have great effects on fish gills. Our objective for this study was to investigate the use of carbonated beverages to stop the bleeding of deeply hooked fish relative to controls. So what we did is separated the study into two parts. During the beginning of the summer, when the water temperature was 11 to 18 degrees Celsius, we tested both Mountain Dew and Coca Cola, and then later in the summer, when the water temperature was around 24 to 27 degrees Celsius, we tested cooler versus koozie Mountain Dew, which I'll get into shortly. To bring the angled fish into the boat, we use a net and put them straight into a water-filled trough. Then, to injure the gills, remove the section roughly 1 centimeter long of gill filament using end cutting pliers. Our treatments were as follows. We had two controls, one where we didn't pour anything onto the fish and the other where we poured carbonated lake water. And then we tested two types of carbonated beverages, Mountain Dew and Coca Cola. So once the fish was assigned a treatment and transferred to a 20-liter white bottom cooler, the following variables were used to evaluate the possible effects that the beverages could have. We used gill color as a proxy for blood loss right after the treatment was applied, after 10 minutes, and after 20 minutes. The intensity of the bleeding right after the gills were cut, after the treatment was applied, after 3 minutes, and again after 5 minutes. Our scale considered 0 to be no bleeding at all, and 3 gushing blood intensely. Additionally, we recorded how long the bleeding took to stop following the transfer to the white bottom cooler and the gill injury. The treatments for part 1, when the water temperature was 11 to 18 degrees Celsius, included baseline where the fish wasn't injured, control where the gills were cut but nothing was poured, carbonated lake water, Mountain Dew, and Coca Cola where the gills were cut and 150 milliliters of each treatment was poured into the gills. When the water temperature was 24 to 27 degrees Celsius, we had the same baseline control as per part 1, but we used Mountain Dew at 4 to 8 degrees Celsius to simulate it being in a cooler on a boat, and Mountain Dew at 24 to 27 degrees Celsius to simulate it being left in a koozie on the boat. For both of the Mountain Dew treatments in part 2, the gills were cut and 150 milliliters of the beverage was poured into the gills. For our results, we did not find any significant differences between the bleeding stop time in any of the treatments during part 1 or in part 2. As for the gill color as a proxy for blood loss, we did not find any significant differences between any of the times, 0, 10, or 20 minutes, in Part 1, or during later in the summer, or Part 2. No significant differences were found between times for bleeding intensity value during Part 1 or in Part 2. Throughout the study, 1% of the fish died. In conclusion, we did not find any evidence that the use of carbonated beverages is beneficial, but bradycardia may give the impression that it is. When we would pour carbonated beverages like Mountain Dew or Coca Cola on the fish's gills, it will look like the fish was holding its breath for anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds, followed by their gills opening up and gushing blood at around a level 3 on our bleeding intensity scale. So when an angler is using this tactic on a fish, they're likely releasing the fish in a dark bottom body of water, not in a white bottom cooler like we did, so they may not be able to see any bleeding, or they may not be holding the fish in the water long enough for the fish to come back down from that hypoxic state and actually start bleeding. So we know that during bradycardiatic events, the hearts of the fish stop in order to restrict the amount of blood loss. So this may be actually what the anglers are seeing when they believe that the Mountain Dew is stopping the fish from bleeding. Additionally, when fish are removed from the water so that carbonated beverages can be used on the gills, the perception that bleeding has ceased is possible, but the effects are largely driven by hypoxia-induced decreases in cardiovascular output. So our recommendation to anglers with carbonated beverages is to keep them for themselves and put the fish back in the water. I would also like to note that this study has been published in the North American Journal of Fisheries Management. There will be a link available on the slide. To end my talk today, I'm going to include a clip from CBC As It Happens Radio that brings light and sums up the study in the best way possible.
Let me start with a gentle warning. If you've ever poured a fizzy, sugary drink on a fish to save its life, well, prepare to have your bubble burst. Researchers at Carleton University have made an important advance in fish first aid, and it boils down to this: stop pouring pop on fish. I know, we've all done it, but on the off chance that you haven't, it turns out a powerful belief has permeated the angling community of late, as if by osmosis, but in reality, by Facebook. The idea is that if a fish is wounded, presumably by having been fished, the carbon dioxide in a can of pop can slow the bleeding by doing a science thing to it. And so began the apparently growing practice of catch, ginger ale, and release among those who love fish enough to catch them with a hook and enough to attempt to counteract said hook catching with carbonation. It's a beautiful, complicated relationship. To test this extremely plausible theory, for some reason, researchers caught 156 Northern Pike. They then inflicted a minor gill injury via a pair of pliers. Then the researchers proceeded to apply Coca Cola, Mountain Dew, or carbonated lake water to the wound. They determined that in each case the treatment had absolutely no effect. It's nothing more than pop science. So let's put an end to the whole Coke and dagger operation.
Thank you very much, and if you have any questions, my email is above on the slide.